Our next speaker from the Green Party and a candidate in Dublin South is Eamon Ryan.
Thank you, Pat. There is no doubt we are in need of reform our political systems. As John Gormley has said, when you look over 50 years and on 3 occasions, our political system has allowed economic crisis to develop in the 50s, in the 80s and in the 2000s, which is a sign to us, clear sign that our political structures are not serving us. I firmly believe that that emphasis within the Green Party on reform having to come from local government up is correct. You have to start with that key reform, even though it's not popular, it doesn't grab the headlines. It is actually, I think, the bedrock change we need to make for 2 reasons. Firstly, we live in a globalised world. If you listen to the likes of Saskia Sassen in terms of how this globalised world is working, it is actually cities or regions which are competing across the world, and we need to get our regional and city governance right so that we are effective in that new globalised trading world. Secondly, in terms of providing for clientism, which we do need to do, there is nothing wrong with having a political system that is responsive to the immediate needs of citizens. But it's a matter of having a response which is in the right location and which is actually not mixing up roles with a strategic political interest with local interests. So we need strong and effective local government to provide what the Irish people rightly want, which is a political system that is responsive to them in terms of how they integrate with the state. In terms of local government, looking first of all at the structure, I believe because, as I said, we're looking at cities and regions which are competing in the world, we need to actually strengthen a regional local government structure that recognises that waste, transport, planning, housing, even policing and education are all done on a regional and not on a county basis effectively, the planning for them. And that's why we would move towards a regional structure that is much more defined, has real powers, perhaps dividing the country into 5 regions: Munster, Connacht Ulster, North Leinster, South Leinster and Dublin, and giving real power to the political system in that regional level. And that's why I believe, while it's been criticised by a number of the opposition, formerly opposition parties, it is essential we proceed as a first stage towards that real political accountability at regional and city level to having a mayor for our city in Dublin. It works in other cities. It is a model that we need to adapt now to be able to be effective as we develop this stronger tier of regional and local government. The answer to the ills of our democracy, I believe, should require more democracy, not less. The current city management system, they're fine people, they're working hard, but it's not responsible, it's not elected, and that's why we believe we should implement the mayoral bill that was put in place by the Green Party that is ready to go. We could introduce it within months. At a level below that, in terms of the actual delivery of local services, not the planning side, but the actual delivery of it, we need a new district or council structure. In some instances, that may be at the similar to the county level we have at present. In other instances, it may actually need to be broken down to smaller and more local district levels. This will take not just one government, but 2 or 3 terms of government, because it is a major transition that you have to plan over time as you strengthen that regional structure and reconfigure what sort of local democratic structures you have. In going in that direction, as well as having direct democratic accountability, we need to get funding of local government right. And I'd have to say, one concern I have in the Fine Gael manifesto where I read, it seems to be a pulling back, a fear of actually taking some of the hard decisions that we are actually going to have to provide such funding. There's more studies and plans and asking with local authorities what they think. We need to be brave in central government at this time as we reconfigure our difficult budget situation to give real funding responsibility and real funding streams to local government, because without such funding you will never get responsibility being taken at local government, and you will never have the sort of democratic structures that actually work, because without that power to raise funds and have the responsibility of where you're allocating them, local government and regional government will never be taken seriously. That needs to change, I think, in the Fine Gael if they get into government. In the Dáil, I agree with the previous speakers that clearly there's an issue about accountability. The failure of our system, as evidenced by the Moriarty Tribunal and the Mahon Tribunal, really begs the question about how are we going to get that sort of level of accountability in when the central democratic system itself has questions to answer. And I agree with some of the earlier comments on us having to look at the Abbey Lara judgment to try and bring in a system which actually is accountable and which is quick and effective and brings public confidence back into our central democratic institutions. Similarly, we need to be clear and honest and have the confidence of our people that the funding system of our democratic parties is correct, is not adding to some of the mistakes that were made in recent years, particularly in the development and housing boom. That requires real transparency, and I believe cutting out business and union funding of parties and instead having a properly funded structure for central parties. It doesn't take huge amounts of money to run a political system. You mainly need good people. And I believe we'll be easier to attract good people if we clear up that whole funding issue. We also need to change the electoral system. That kind of fundamental flaw in our system, that the competition that exists in our multi-seat constituencies, particularly between members of their own party, is a problem. I saw it in my own constituency in Dublin South. You'd go out to a meeting and Tom Kitt's representative and Seamus Brennan's representative would actually be the opposition and the government at the one time, tearing lumps out of each other. You'd be there left, well, what do I have here? And that's a problem that we do have to address. We believe the move towards a single seat option with the options of list system are one of the ways in which we could get over that flaw in our current system. We also are unique in saying we shouldn't get rid of the Seanad. We need to radically reform how it's elected, and I think we should connect it possibly to some of those regional structures that I mentioned earlier on. But it can and will provide some of the connection to the people who aren't traditionally involved in politics, to bring them in and possibly bring them in right into government. Look at what's happened in the UK in terms of how they've evolved the House of Lords in that regard, provides us a model how a bicameral system can actually provide a real check on legislation and can bring in outside people into the political system with some of the expertise that we do need. Lastly, in terms of public service reform, I know we didn't score particularly well on that. One of the things we were doing, and I would say we need to be quick here on this, is we need to implement what we were actually doing. Look at that revised programme for government we agreed a year and a half ago with Fianna Fáil. They may not grab the headlines, but changing the TLAC, the Top Level Appointments Commission, putting in an outside chair rather than having an internal person, could again be done and was agreed in government, ready to go within weeks of any new government coming in. Let's do it. Creating the appointments which we set out in that revised programme for government for a head of information, a CIO, for a head of shared access or shared service and head of procurement is ready to go and could be done. Those people answering to a cabinet subcommittee on public service reform or to a minister, so that you actually start getting reform immediately. It's that top level appointments changes are actually important because the rest of the system takes their lead from that. I'll leave it at that. The last point I'd say is, in political reform, one last point, we need good people. We need people with real skills, and we need to inspire some younger people into politics. To do that, we need to get away from the same old politics where we're lashing each other. A lot of the online stuff at the moment is vicious. Okay, it's the old Ballymagash politics, it's great fun, but it's not actually inspiring people. Let's work together collectively to get the country out of a crisis, to change our political system, and to bring some new people in. Thank you.